This evening, we want to talk about focusing on financial priorities. A recent United Methodist Communications online survey on the impact of COVID-19 on churches had these findings. 76% of churches say church giving is down. 23% say giving is unchanged. 59% say finances are tight, but they can manage by reducing expenses. 26% say they expect to make significant changes. 34% say giving is down more than 40%. 15% say finances are not a concern. And finally, 52% say they offer electronic giving at church. And so as you take all of this in from a recent survey at the end of last year about the impact of COVID-19 on churches, no matter whether we're small, medium, or large, all of us have been impacted in some way by COVID-19. And here are some of the church finance best practices. The first one is online giving, and based on the survey, you saw that more than half of churches responded that now they offer online giving. And so online giving is one of the ways that we can expand giving opportunities for our members and guests. The other best practice is thank you letters sent out to donors, those who support you financially. Number 3, narrative budgets, sharing your story more than just a line item budget and income and expense, but it shares stories about the impact that you're making with financial contributions. And then number 4, stewardship sermons, preaching about stewardship, preaching about generosity, small group studies about stewardship, small group studies about generosity. And then number 5, shifting from the end of year statements that are being mailed out this month in January to quarterly statements where members get at least 4 times a year statements so they can see their giving to the local congregation. And then number 6, offertory testimonials. Even in virtual worship, we can carve out time for testimonials and stories during offering to let people know the impact of their gifts in our ministry and in our community. Number 7, written policies and procedures that guide the finance committee on their work and being good stewards of the finances that God has allowed to come our way. Number 8, rotate leaders often. In some churches, some people serve for 20 and 30 years as the treasurer or the finance chairperson. And you want to make sure that you rotate leaders often so you get fresh eyes in and you get a wealth of experience that you can spread out throughout the entire congregation. Number 9, shifting from budget terminology to a funding plan. And a funding plan is not just coming up with the expenses for the church for a given year and hoping you have enough income to cover the expenses, but a funding plan is really talking about how you're going to plan to receive funding for the year. Number 10, impact stories about how you're changing lives with the resources that you are receiving. Number 11, legacy giving, simply including a statement in your virtual bulletin or your church bulletin to ask people to remember the church in their will is a good conversation starter around legacy giving. Number 12, internal controls, making sure that more than one person counts the money, writes the checks, deposits the money, and so forth, where you have checks and balances in place so that you won't have fraud or even the appearance of fraud. Number 13, financial literacy, And so we ask people to give, and yes, all belongs to God, but we also need to teach people how to manage God's resources. And we need to teach financial literacy, and we need to train them on how to manage God's resources. Number 14, capital campaigns. Most of us think of a capital campaign if we need a new roof or if we're expanding or building a new church building, but you can have a capital campaign for more than just buildings or expansions. And then number 15, accounting software. QuickBooks and Shelby and other financial accounting software and membership software. And then number 16, an audit team exchange. And so if you're below the threshold of $500,000 in your budget, you can use an audit team exchange where the finance team will come from one church and do the audit for a sister church. And then their finance team will go to the other church and do their audit for them, where you have fresh eyes looking at your financial documents, your financial statements, and it doesn't cost. A lot of churches do not get audits because they think it has to be expensive. And that is not the case. You can do a volunteer audit team exchange. And so as we talk about tonight, priorities and focusing on financial priorities, the first thing we need to do is clarify and have clarity on our mission. And so as we start at the bottom of this pyramid, the question is, what does each ministry plan to do with that will help us achieve the church's goals? And so as we look at the bottom, two categories, in-reach and outreach. And so what are the ministry goals that flow up to help the church accomplish the church's goals? And then the next question is, what are the goals for the church this year? Have you set goals? And as it continues to flow up the pyramid, what's your mission? What is your unique purpose? What do you do? And how will you get there? And then finally, vision. What will it look like when we're done? What is your picture of your vision? What is your desired outcome? Where are you going? And what will it look like when you arrive? And so as we look at church finances, we want to keep all of this in mind: ministry goals, church goals, mission, and vision. And we want to make sure that there is an alignment with money and our mission. And a lot of times in churches, there is mission drift, where we drift away from our mission. And especially so during a pandemic or during a crisis, we tend to drift and we focus on the urgent. And we spend a lot of time on the urgent and we lose sight of what is important, who we are, and what we are to accomplish. And so we want to make sure that during this time of the pandemic that we don't have mission drift, to drift away from our mission and lose focus on who we are and what we want to accomplish. So just want to ask now for you to think about, what's the vision at your church? What is the mission of your church? What are church goals that you have for 2021? And then what are ministry goals that will help the church fulfill its church goals? And so we see two broad categories: discipleship, in-reach, and evangelism. And so as you accomplish your goals, what are you doing in discipleship? What are you doing in evangelism? And so again, this flows from the bottom of the pyramid up to the vision of the church. So now here's a little mission exercise to help you reframe your mission, or at least bring it back into focus if you've lost focus. The first part is, who are we? And it's more than just the name of your church, but who are you? There are many churches in your district. many churches in your community, but who are you? And then the second question is, what do we do? What is your primary mission? What do you do? The third question is, who do we serve? Who is our primary target audience? Who are the people we're trying to reach? Who are the people we're trying to serve? And then finally, why do we do it? What is our desired outcome? And so as you think about these questions flow into church finance as well and will help you to determine what your priorities are. Last year, you may have been able to do everything for everyone, but this year, perhaps your finances are down and you can't do everything that you used to do last year. So what priorities are you going to set? What can you do if your church building is closed? What can you do if you're limited to 25% of worshipers coming in the building? Now that the weather is cold, some of us got snow over the last few hours. What are you going to do if you were doing outdoor worship? And so all of those are factors into your mission. And even though the church building may be closed, we still have a mission to accomplish. We still are called to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And we can still do that. It is different, but we still can do it. One of my favorite fast food restaurants is Chick-fil-A, and they still say they didn't invent the chicken, they just invented the chicken sandwich. But when the pandemic hit, what they did was they still made chicken sandwiches, but they closed their restaurant. You had to do mobile ordering or drive-through or curbside pickup. And then once they realized that the pandemic was going to be here for a while, their mission remained the same, to sell the best chicken sandwich, but how they delivered it changed. So then they invested in low emission cars, and now they will deliver your food to you. They changed their parking lot to include most of the spaces for curbside pickup, where you just order on the app and you pull up in your space and enter your space, and then they'll bring your food out to you. So again, the mission for them did not change, but their how changed. No longer can you come in and sit and dine in the restaurant, but they changed how they deliver their mission, how they deliver their food. And the church has changed. How we do church has changed. And so now we have to, if we haven't already, to be thinking about how can we still fulfill our mission, even though the church sanctuary may be closed, even though the church building may be closed. How can we fulfill our purpose in the midst of not having access to the church building? So the next thing I want you to do is to identify priorities. And so what you see before you is 4 categories. You have mortar or brick and mortar or the church building. You have mission. You have ministry or discipleship. And you have administrative or administration. And so what I want you to do now is allocate your resources to each of these categories. You can use percentages or you can use dollar amounts. It's up to you, whichever is easy. So the first category we look at is mortar. How much of your budget, how much of your resources are you spending for the church building? Even though the building may be closed, you still may have a mortgage, you still have utility costs, you still have the cost of the church building. And so what percentage of your income, how much of your budget goes to brick and mortar? Next, how much of your mission, your budget goes to mission? How much of your budget goes to this category? Or if you're using dollar amounts, how much goes to dollar in a dollar amount to mission. And then the next one is ministry or discipleship. How much of your ministry budget goes to ministry or discipleship? What percentage of your budget goes to ministry or discipleship? And then finally, administrative cost, staff, the pastor, and so forth. What percentage of your budget goes to administrative cost? And while you have some ideas and some figures in mind, I want you to consider of these categories, which category listed here is your top priority? Is the church building your top priority? And the only appeals that you're making is for donors to give so that you can keep the lights on, so that you can keep the heat on. That is your number one priority, brick and mortar. Or is mission your number one priority? Or is ministry and discipleship your number one priority? And then finally, is administration or administrative costs your top priority? And so now we want to align the mission and the money at our church. And so as you have identified these categories, the building itself or mortar or mission or ministry and discipleship or administrative cost, as you look at where you spend most of your income, does it align with your mission? Is it helping you to further your mission? Or does it inhibit you from achieving your mission? For those of us who have a church building, yes, we know we need a church building. We need lights, we need heat, we need a roof, we need all of those things that we need for a building. But just because you have a building does not mean that you're doing ministry or you're doing mission. And so if you put all of your resources in the church building just to keep up with the maintenance and the upkeep, and you're not focusing on ministry, then does that align with your mission? And then if you say mission is our top priority, but you look at your budget and you have a little of your budget allocated to mission, is that really your priority if you don't have resources allocated for the mission? The same thing with ministry and discipleship. If ministry is important to you and fulfilling your mission, and discipleship is important to you and fulfilling your mission, is it in alignment with the money that you spend and the mission? And then administrative cost, is that in alignment with mission? Do you spend more on administrative cost that inhibit you from achieving your mission, or does more staff help you achieve your mission? And so again, we want to make sure that we start thinking about aligning our mission and our money. And so these four categories will kind of help you think about these. Another way to look at these, if we were to have these as buckets, which one of the buckets here, or you may have another one in your case, that if you were to fill that bucket up and it started to overflow, which bucket would you want to fill first that will overflow into helping you achieve your mission? And so as we think about filling the bucket, we're filling the bucket with resources. And we want the resources that we put in the bucket to overflow into other categories, other areas. What some churches tend to do is we sprinkle a little bit around to each bucket. We put a little bit or a lot in mortar or the building. We put a little bit in mission. We put a little bit in discipleship and ministry. And maybe we put more in administration. But I want you to think that as we look at money and as we look at aligning our mission and our money, which one of these can you put more resources in that will cause overflow that will help you achieve your mission? Another thing that we can look at is if you look at worship, if you look at small groups, and if you look at mission as three of your buckets. Of those three buckets, if you were to fill one of the buckets up that will overflow into the second bucket, which would that bucket be? And so many of us are worshiping virtually or online or live stream. If we were to fill that bucket up and invest in whatever technology we need to make that happen, will that overflow into small groups, virtual small groups, or those who are meeting in their space, maybe small groups following safety protocols in your church building? And then as that bucket fills and then it overflows to mission, now you can see how this flows to helping you achieve your mission. One of the worst things that you can have with a car is for your car to be out of alignment. If your car is out of alignment, it will steer in a different direction. Not only will it steer in a different direction, but also it will wear out the tires. Whenever you purchase new tires, the first thing they want you to get is a four-wheel alignment so that your car will wear the tires out evenly. And so in the church, sometimes we're out of alignment. And instead of working smarter, we're working harder, and we're working against the very mission that we're trying to achieve. And so as we look at strategies for refocusing and focusing on financial priorities, we want to make sure that we're in alignment, that the priorities that are important to us, that we make sure that we put money in those priorities because they are important and they are a priority to us. Many things that we did last year, we may not be able to do all of those this year. And so therefore we need to prioritize and not spend money in all of the categories that we used to spend money in. But what are our priorities? And so we have to be willing to look at those priorities and bring them back into alignment with our mission and our money. And so where your treasure is, your heart will be also. And so as you go through this process, it will help you determine a gap. Wow, I thought my heart was, my heart should be in this category in mission, but it isn't in mission. My money is over here and I want to bring my money over here and I want to close the gap. And so once you determine what the gap is, this is actually how we spend our money, but this is how we want to spend our money. Now you have to start closing the gap and start focusing on the priorities that you set for your ministry. And so one of the ways that will help you do that is a strategic budget. It includes a funding plan. And I shared earlier that a funding plan is one of the best practices. The funding plan is how you're going to raise the funds to cover the expenses that you have in your budget. And so many times when we put together a budget, we come up with all of the expenses and we say, well, we have $300,000 of expenses and we want to generate the income to cover the expenses. But do you also create a funding plan? How many donors do we need to fund ministry? How many categories do we need to fund ministry? Do we have cash reserves to fund ministry? Do we have cash on hand in the bank that we can access to fund ministry? What are our fundraising strategies to fund our ministry? And so again, it's not just putting the budget together based on expenses, but a strategic budget as you're coming to bring everything into alignment, your mission and your money. It includes a funding plan. Also, it includes a spending plan. And so when we think of a budget as a spending plan, it gives us more access to the budget. It makes the budget more nimble. We reimagine the budget. And so There may be things in the budget, but they may not be enough cash flow for us to make that expenditure right now. And so we have to come up with a spending plan based on what we're spending. Does that fit our mission? Is that in alignment with who we are? Is that in alignment with our vision? And just because we've done them for many, many years doesn't mean that we should continue them. And so as we're thinking strategically, what can we do now in a virtual world and an online campus? What can we do now that we're one church in two locations, online and then also the brick and mortar congregation? How does that affect our spending? What do we need to spend money on so that we grow instead of spending money on the things that we've always spent money on? The budget's priorities reflect the church mission. And so again, in the budget, the priorities reflect the church mission. If you've identified a gap in the exercise that we did earlier, now you know what the gap is, and now you know what you need to do to close the gap so that the budget's priority reflect the church mission. It's based on projected income, not just the past. And again, sometimes when we put our budgets together, we add a cost of living adjustment, 3 to 5%, whatever it was last year, we increase it. And that's all that we do. And so again, we need to make sure that we base our strategic budget on projected income. One of the ways that you can do projected income is to look at a month compared to the previous year, that same month. And if you have the appropriate records, also look at 2 or 3 years prior to that. And yes, we know last year is an anomaly with COVID-19, but it also helps us to understand the giving patterns throughout the year. Even though most churches have a budget and they divide by 12, we all know that money doesn't come in 12 equal installments each month. And so you want to make sure that as you're being strategic, that you base it on projected income. Some churches experience the summer slide where people go on vacation during the summer. And if your only avenue of giving is in person, then a lot of times people, when they go on vacation, they're not in person, so they don't give. And so you want to do budget analysis to determine projected income. You want to do budget forecasting to determine if the next 3 months will be what you think it will be in terms of your income. And then finally, for your strategic budget, the plan is communicated clearly to all involved. And when it comes to focusing on financial priorities, we have to make sure that we communicate clearly to all involved. If there is an anticipated shortfall, we communicate the shortfall. We communicate with our donors. We communicate where we stand, what is reality in terms of our finances. We communicate and let people know what our strategic budget is telling us. So why don't people give to the church? One of the top reasons that people don't give to the church is the church doesn't make giving easy. In many churches prior to last year, the only way you could give was through the offering plate or mailing in your offering. And so it wasn't accessible. And once churches closed, unless they dropped off their offering, the only option was to mail in the offering or have someone pick it up. And so if we want people to give more to the mission and ministry of the church, we need to make sure that we make giving easy. I spoke to one church last year and they said, well, I don't want to pay the fees of online giving. And I asked them, well, do you send out stamps to members and envelopes that are prepaid with postage? And they said, yes, we allocate about $25 per person for stamps throughout the year. We send it out to them and We put a stamp in the envelope and they send it back to us. And so when you think about it, it's about 4 stamps a month or so per member. And so I said, well, you are paying fees, hoping that they send in their offering. And so it's just a matter of paying fees in a different way. And some of the giving platforms that we'll talk about later allow for the giver to pay the fees. So the church doesn't have to pay the fees. Number two, the church doesn't ask people to give. We assume that because God owns everything and that we should be tithers or generous givers, that we don't have to ask people to give, that people are going to give. And yet, year after year, the research tells us that the average United Methodist family only gives about 3% of their income annually to the church. And so we assume that people will give, but some people won't give unless you ask. And so we have to be willing to ask people to give, and not just give for the sake of giving, but there should be compelling reasons for us to ask them to give. Number three, church doesn't tell why you should give. And so again, just give. You're supposed to do it. It's your obligation. This is what you're called to do. God calls you to give, without telling people why they should give. Give so that we can provide 200 meals per month to those who need meals, our seniors and other people in the community who may not be able to go grocery shopping and other things. Give so that we can support them. We have a lot of students in our neighborhood who don't have winter coats, and we want you to give so that we can give a coat to any child in our community who needs a winter coat so they can be warm. And so again, let's tell people why they should give. Number four, church doesn't make giving about the donor. And I've heard a lot of churches make requests for donations or giving, and some of them are just to the point. We need $10,000 so that we can keep the lights on. We need you to help us to pay our bill. We need a new roof. We need this. And it's always about the church, but it's not about the donor. It's not about the donor's desire to make an impact. It's not about the donor's desire to give to a cause, give to something that is impactful beyond just paying for the lights to stay on. And so we need to make sure that we make giving about the donor. Giving is a spiritual discipline. And we need to help our members understand that it's a spiritual discipline, and we need to teach them how to be good stewards of the resources that God has given us. But it's not always about what the church needs, but it's about how can we help members achieve their spiritual discipline of giving. And then finally, the church doesn't thank donors for their gifts. And so again, sometimes we don't thank donors for their gifts because we assume that they should give. And again, God calls us to give, and therefore we don't need to say thank you. That's between them and God. And so when we say thank you to donors and members who give, written thank you notes, thank you videos, thank you emails, all types of ways that we can say thank you to those who give to the church. That will go a long way when we show appreciation to donors for giving their gifts to the church. Here are some questions that you should ask about church finances. And so as we are beginning a new year now, the first month of 2021, what we received. How much income have we received through 4 weeks in January? Question number two, who gave the income? Do we have 20% of our members giving 80% of the income to the church? Do we have 3 or 4 donors who give most of the giving to the church? And so not only do we want to know what we receive, but we also want to know who gave it. Who are your top donors? Who are your middle donors? And then who are your donors that are at the bottom that maybe through a conversation and working with them, you can get them to become a middle giver? And so again, you want to know who gave it. Number three, you want to know what is the intended use? Is it designated or undesignated? What's the purpose of the gifts from the donors? Are they giving for a new organ? Are they giving for a new piano? Or they're giving undesignated for the general use of the church for our mission in our community? And then number four, we want to ask what we spent. What were our expenses? Where is the money going? And if what we're spending the money on doesn't align with our mission, doesn't align with our vision, then why are we spending money on that item or those categories? So how much are we spending? And then number five, where it went. What are we paying? And so some churches last year, since the church building was closed, they had a landscaping company to do all their landscaping in 2019. But with the church building being closed, they use scout troops and volunteers to do the landscaping of their church, and they saved thousands of dollars just making that one change. Another church identified that we have all this money in the budget for prepackaged communion, and we're doing virtual communion. And so therefore, we don't need to buy all of those prepackaged kits. Can we reallocate that money to something else? And so those are some of the things that we need to observe when we analyze the budget. What do we have in here that we can reduce, or what can we cut? And then number six, what we have left. And so after you have received the income and after you have spent the income, what do we have left? Do you have any reserves? Do you have an emergency fund? Is there anything left over, or do you spend everything or more than you receive? And then number seven, how are we doing? Evaluate how you're doing. Don't wait until you do the budget for 2022. But in this pandemic, you should be evaluating weekly or monthly. And so make sure that you evaluate how you're doing and how the income and expenses are being used. And also, are we in alignment with our mission? Are we in alignment with our vision? We want to make sure that everything that we do is in alignment with our vision. What giving metrics should we be looking at as we talk about this strategic budget and as we talk about strategies to focus on financial priorities? One of the metrics that you can use is something called a giving unit. And a giving unit is an individual or a couple or family who gives to your church on a regular basis. And so determining your giving units will help you to manage your strategic budget. Not only do you want to look at giving units, how many people are giving to the income of the church, but how much is giving per unit? And so to determine that, we take our donations, we divide by giving units, and that gives us our average giving percent per giving unit. Again, our average giving per giving unit. The other thing that we want to look at is, what are the giving trends? Giving compared to a previous period. What was the giving in January of 2020? What was the giving compared to January 2019? What are the giving trends in our church? Number four, we want to look at giving distribution. That is your church giving spread among your members. Again, do you have one or two large donors who give most of the income to your church? And God forbid if they left or stopped giving, then your church would be hurting financially. And so as best you can, you want to spread the giving distribution, not just to one or two or five people, but you want to spread it out through the entire congregation. And then the other metric that you want to look at is giving and expenses. Your church's comparison of giving versus income. And so what is the income compared to the expenses? And so you want to analyze that often to see if you're on track, to see if you stay on mission so that you can align your mission and your ministry with the church budget. The other thing that we need to do as we look at alignment and we look at priorities is to assess your finances. Did our income decrease last year? From the survey, we saw that a lot of churches had their income decrease due to COVID-19. But also it reveals some churches had their income increase. And so did our income increase last year during COVID-19? And then some remained the same. Did our income remain the same? And as you assess your finances, what expenses can we eliminate or reduce this year? What expenses can we eliminate or reduce that aren't helping us achieve our mission? What income and expenses can we eliminate? What expenses can we eliminate that don't further our mission and don't further our vision? And so I shared before, landscaping was something that some people were able to eliminate. Some churches were able to eliminate altar flowers being out of the church building. They didn't have to buy the altar flowers every month or every other Sunday, depending on how long they lived. And so again, there are some things that we can eliminate that aren't helping us fulfill our mission and being out of the building that we're not using. Can we talk to our mortgage company if we have a mortgage and come up with a way that we can have a holiday on the mortgage payments or interest or whatever that they will be able to offer? Look at all of the things that we have at the church. One church had 7 phone lines. And during the pandemic, with the church building being closed, they were able to eliminate $40 per line per month by simply looking at what they had, and they didn't need 7 telephone lines currently with the church building being closed. So again, assess your church finances and bring things in alignment and pick those things that will help you further your ministry and further your mission. What supplies or services can we eliminate or reduce this year? Some churches have gotten volunteers to do the snow plowing and make sure the sidewalks are clear instead of using a company or a contractor to do that. And so there are different ways that we can explore eliminating or reducing expenses this year. And so again, we saw earlier that a lot of people don't give because giving isn't easy. And so in the past, for most churches or some churches, there were only 2 typical giving methods: in the mail or the offering plate. And so now, if that's all you still have, you want to make sure that you move beyond these 2 giving methods. As you're looking for financial priorities and funding your mission and funding your priorities, you want to make sure that you expand giving methods. And so you want to move from the mail and the offering plate to multiple ways to give, expand the giving methods. And so here you see, quite frankly, there are 5 ways to give to the church: in-person giving, through the mail. And so you still have those, and there are nothing wrong with those methods of giving. And so we want to make sure that we encourage people to give that way if that is their preference. But also we want to make it easier for those who are willing to give online and who have access to a computer, or those who have a smartphone who have access to an app that can text and give, or use an app and press a button in 5 seconds they can give. And so we want to expand the ways that we can give. And so if you're looking to fund your ministry priorities, have you expanded beyond the typical ways of giving through the mail and offering plate to some of these options? Online giving, mobile apps, text to give. And so there are a lot of different ways that you can expand giving in your church. And so as we look at giving platforms and we do a comparison, some of the popular giving apps, and there are a lot of them, but here are some of them that are frequently used. Cash App, the price is free. The transaction fee is 1.5%. The platform is mobile, and there is no cover the fee option, and you can't do recurring payments. And so for every $100 given, then it will be $1.50 in transaction fee. And so is $1.50 worth it to ensure that you consistently get $100? Most would say yes. Some may say no. Givelify is free. The transaction fee is 2.9% plus 30 cents. The platform is online and mobile. There's no cover fee option. And yes, you can have recurring payments. PayPal is free, 2.2% plus 30 cents per transaction. Online platform, no cover the fee option. Yes, you can set up recurring payments. Tidely is free, 2.9% plus 30 cents per transaction. Online and mobile platform, there's a cover the fee option and recurring payments option. Vanco is a $20 fee. Transaction fee is 2.65% plus 38 cents per transaction. Online and mobile platform, and there is a cover fee option and a recurring payment option. And so again, these are some of the popular apps and giving platforms and comparisons. So again, it ranges from about 2% to 2.9%, almost 3% in terms of the transaction fees that are associated with each transaction. So do your research and decide which one is better for you and expand the way that people give to your church.
Gary, can I ask a quick question?
Now, how can you increase your finances? And so apply for COVID relief grants. There's a second round of the Paycheck Protection Program, forgivable loan, line of credit with Mid-Atlantic United Methodist Foundation, are looking at some creative ways that you can use your space. Some churches have done a food distribution center where they receive income for being a food distribution center. One church is doing an online learning center for children of essential workers who have to work and aren't at home, for them to be in distant learning for school. And so these are just some ideas that you can do to increase your finances and help you meet your priorities. And so at this time, I'll end the slideshow and take questions.
Good. Carrie, question right off the bat. Somebody was asking the same way. Cover fee option. Could you explain that? Go back on that previous slide and explain what the cover fee option is for Vanco and those characters.
Can you repeat that, Frank?
Yeah. The question was, can you explain the cover fee option? So it's the fact that you can, I think it's that you can ask the donor to pay the fees. Is that correct?
Yes, the cover the fee option is you can ask the donor, if they give you $100 and the fee is $2, you can ask them to cover the $2 fee for their transaction. And so therefore the church doesn't have to incur the cost, but the donor, whoever is giving the offering or giving the money to the church, will pay that for you, and the church doesn't have to do that. So it means they're paying a little bit more, but they also are covering the fee, so the church doesn't have to pay.
Nice, well said. The other question, I think you answered it, was talking about the difference between mission and vision, and they were asking that earlier on, but I believe, raise your hand unless, but I think you went over that extensively, the difference, and more in depth. So I think that was it. It was a really good question. Good. I also published the poll, so you can see the poll. Does your church support overseas missionaries? And about half said yes. Has your church added a new outreach or ministry during COVID? About a third said they had. Does a church award high school students with a scholarship to trade school or college? And about a third said they do. So that was interesting in this time. So that was good. Any other questions we have right now? We still got Carrie. I apologize. I should have gone into his extensive background, all the different things he's done. He's a trained coach.
No.
He's been a pastor in inner city Baltimore and DC and back and forth and all over. and we're really blessed to have him. I just think everybody knows Kerry James. He was just asked to help out with Saving Grace recently, which was really, it's personal finances, right? Kerry,
Right,
tell
exactly.
me about what Saving Grace is, so they put a plug for that.
Some of our churches have been using Financial Peace and a lot of Dave Ramsey's resources, and I've used them as a church again for financial literacy and to help people get out of debt and manage, debt. And so, Saving Grace is a Methodist version of Financial Peace, and to really help, everyone manage their finances. And it talks about spending plans and saving plans, and even on your personal finance level, identifying the gaps that you have. Again, you want to save to get a house, but you are spending X amount of dollars for coffee every day, instead of making your coffee at home. And so if your goal is to buy that house, then how do I adjust my spending so that I can get the saving for that house? And so again, various lessons by various leaders throughout the United Methodist Church came together to put that resource together, and it is meeting a lot of needs of clergy, of people in the church as well, to help manage their resources even during this pandemic. So it was timely, right on time.
It really was. It's great. And during your presentation, I wrote one note down for myself too. One thing that when we did in our church, I go to St. Paul's in Sykesville, the distribution of the donors. It was fascinating for us to figure out that we found out, what percent of the budget is being given by what percent of the donors. And we have one donor. We all guess who it is. We don't know. The pastor and the finance chair, or the stewardship know who it is, but financial secretary knows who it is.
Right.
But somebody gives 10% of the budget. So if they move to Florida or retire, whatever, our church is going to have, it could be bigger. It could be 30 or 40%, some of our churches too. But so of the key things you were talking about tonight, is there one or two that you would sort of emphasize the most that would be most helpful for churches?
The one thing I would emphasize is, again, you want to make sure that you have your mission and your money in alignment. And
Good.
so, when things are tight, we tend to, react out of urgency. And sometimes we drift away from our mission. And so, yes, the church buildings may be closed. In some cases, some are back in the building. But what can we do? We still are called to be the church. And so we still have a mission. And so how can we fulfill our mission a little differently, socially distanced with the mask and, whatever the case may be. But we want to make sure that we align our mission and our money so that our priorities are being funded and that we can cover them. And sometimes that means that some things that we've been doing for a long time, we can't continue to do them because they are not a part of our mission. And so they're not helping us to further our mission. And then the other thing I would say is to make sure that you're doing the budget analysis. And so with the pandemic that's going on now, I recommend that churches really analyze the budget monthly and really see the income and really look at expenses so that you can adjust it. And so don't be afraid to do budget reallocations. And, you mentioned the forecasting tool that, that we can send to people. But if they put that together and really get a sense of budget projections, budget forecasting, and all of that to get a better handle on, the finances, then it can help you, make sure that the money matches your mission, and you're aware of it before things happen, that you're projecting out the budget.